Today, we'll be focusing on how SMEs are navigating sales and business development during the pandemic and share the latest insights from the fourth edition of the Small and Medium Business Trends Report recently released by Salesforce. My name is Ala Dragola, and I am the Director of Parliamentary Affairs and SME Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'm pleased to be moderating today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to thank the incredible sponsors that are highlighted on your screen who have made our Canadian Business Resiliency Network possible. In particular, I want to highlight and thank today's webinar partner, Salesforce, for their incredibly generous support of the CBRN during the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, these last 6 months have been extremely challenging for all businesses, but the impacts have been acutely felt by the small business community. Earlier this year, Salesforce made the CBRN's Small Business Relief Fund possible by providing $10,000 grants to 62 Canadian small businesses from across the country to help with their recovery efforts. This kind of support makes a critical difference in the lives of these hardworking businesses, so thank you. Joining us from Salesforce today, we have Adam Kirsh and Laura Norman here to share their insights with the group. Adam is the AVP of Commercial Sales in the emerging and small business market for Canada and is responsible for driving growth and customer success for the Canadian Commercial Business Unit. Laura is the Senior Director of Small Business Marketing at Salesforce and manages the awareness team, which focuses on developing content and resources to help small and medium businesses find more customers, win their business, and keep them happy for life. Thank you both, Adam and Laura, for taking the time today to share your expertise with the group. I'm now happy to turn the floor over to you, Laura, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Ala. Before we get started, I just have to show my obligatory legal slide. I won't read all of it to you, but if you can advance, thank you. I just need to let you know to please make any purchasing decisions based on products that are and services that are currently available. So before we dig into our data, I just want to talk a little bit about how the data was derived. Next slide, please. Our trends report talked to more than 2,300 SMB owners and leaders across the globe. We originally went out into the field at the end of February, beginning of March, but as we started to compile our report, COVID hit, and we realized that the data wasn't really relevant to what SMBs were experiencing at the time. So we went back out into the field with a follow-up survey in August. And what we have here now is a unique perspective on how things changed for SMB owners 6 months into the pandemic. So this spring, as we all know it, the world completely changed. Our COO at Salesforce likes to say that we started out thinking we were running a mile, and it turned out that we were running a marathon. No one thought the pandemic was going to last as long as it did. I know for me, I work in San Francisco. Our office closed at the beginning of March. We went home thinking that we'd be back and everything would be the same at the end of May. Here we are in October, and we know we won't be back before next year. So what happened for all of us is that we went from a survival mode to evolution to continuous pivoting, and now we've sort of adjusted to a new normal that's quite uncertain. One thing is for sure, the business is not going to go back to exactly the way it was before. And SMBs are facing an uncertain future. So it's no surprise that some of the hardest hit have been hospitality or retail. And while we all care very much for our communities, local mandates and health requirements are making it particularly hard for SMBs facing the future. But, next slide, please. SMBs are a resilient bunch. They're optimistic about the future. And we found when we went back in the field with our survey in August that although optimism was down, it was still at 72% of SMBs being optimistic about the future. And when we talked to our customers and partners about this, what we found is that people have realized that they're stronger than they knew they were, that they can pivot, that they can adapt their business, and that they know that they have it in them to do it. So when looking at our research, we took a look at how successful SMBs are addressing the crisis and preparing for the future. And we identified 4 trends that I want to share with you today. These are the 4 trends. The first is this idea of customer orientation. It's really doubling down on meeting customer expectations. And it's powered to a large extent by accelerated digitization. We've also all been touched this year by racial inequalities, and we're seeing a focus on justice. And we're also seeing that SMBs are putting a lot more effort into preparing for any more crises that might happen in this uncertain future. So let's dig into the first trend. Let's talk about customer orientation. So in the past 10 years, we've all seen a proliferation of cell phones and social networks. I have a teenager, 2 teenagers, so maybe a little too much social networks in my house. But what this creates is this anywhere access, anytime access to information and to reviews. So customer expectations have just gone through the roof. And Salesforce research tells us that 66% of customers expect companies to understand their unique needs. So when we in our report looked at what are the most constraining factors on SMB operations, meeting customer expectations was number 2 for SMBs, both before the pandemic and in the pandemic, second only to access to capital. So customer expectations have not taken a break during this pandemic. Can we advance? But SMBs are making changes, successful SMBs in particular, to how they interact with customers to meet these expectations. So in particular, they're being more careful about customer communications. So things like being proactive and transparent about how their business is navigating the pandemic. Changing the ways that customers can reach them. So for example, expanding hours or having a greater presence on social media, and offering more flexibility to customers. So that might be expanding the terms of their return policies or changing their payment policies. And in particular, I'd like to draw your attention that SMBs are prioritizing developing customer relationships for the long term over one-time transactions. So in this chart, the dark purple shows how growing SMBs are leaning into all of these changes in a much more profound way than stagnant or declining ones. So this customer orientation is powered to a certain extent by our second trend. And our second trend is accelerated digitization. So if we look at the chart here, what we're seeing here is that SMBs are really leaning into digitization and speeding up what they're doing because of the pandemic. In fact, growing SMBs are 25% more likely to have accelerated their digitization initiatives. One thing that I noticed in looking at the research in terms of Canada, that of the businesses that were less than 50% digitized before the pandemic, 41% say it has slowed or halted those initiatives, which is a much bigger percentage than global. So I would urge you, if you're one of those businesses, to take another look at digitization. So our next slide shows some of the benefits of this accelerated digitization on SMB operations. And again, growing businesses are represented in darker purple. But this use of technology for operations is driving customer interactions. It's influencing an organization's ability to stay open and in business. And it's driving the growth of their customer base. These are all things that are benefiting growing businesses more than stagnant and declining ones. And you'll notice that a lot of these benefits are around customers. So companies are using technology to really pivot to the customer. So it's no surprise then, next slide please, that companies' use of CRM technology is on the rise. So if you're not familiar with CRM, it stands for Customer Relationship Management. And that's what our company, Adam's and my company, Salesforce, does. We create CRM technology that helps you manage all of your customer relationships and interactions in one place. And so I guess it's no surprise that I'm going to work for a CRM company and tell you that our technology is on the rise. But our research is showing that there's an almost 25% increase in CRM use just since March of 2019. So small businesses are finding that managing all of this customer information in one app is really helping their business. So our next trend is around social justice. And I think many of us this year were touched by racial inequalities. This was probably particularly felt in the United States, and this slide does focus on US data. But what we found in talking to SMB leaders in August, we asked whether their race or ethnicity is a disadvantage while running their business. And we found that 1 in 3 Black business leaders who responded said that their race or ethnicity had been a disadvantage to them. And this is disproportionately larger than other respondents. And SMBs, go to the next slide, are leaning in to help this. So you'll see that 26% have made an active effort to train employees on more inclusive practices. They've had conversations regarding race and diversity, and they've taken a public stance in racial justice issues. So at Salesforce, equality is one of our core values. So we're certainly pleased to see this. And I'd just like to note that in Canada, almost 30% of your small businesses have had conversations about diversity in the past 4 months. So you are leading the globe. And that's wonderful, wonderful to see. So our last trend is about looking to the future and about preparing for the future. So a lot of us were surprised by the crisis this spring, and SMBs are taking action to make sure that they are in a good place in the event of future market volatility or future crises. So again, growing SMBs are represented here with the darker purple, and they're more likely to be taking these actions. They're adopting technology to help digitize their customer interactions and their internal communications and their internal workflows, all things that will enable, for example, their ability to work at home. We'll go back to some of the old normal, but many of the pandemic changes are here to stay. Things like buying online and working at home. And it's important in looking to the future to invest in these areas. Also, growing SMBs are 28% more likely to have started to set aside an emergency fund so that they have the capital they need in the event of future crises. So on our next slide, we just show how technology supports SMB growth. So I spoke about digitization before in terms of meeting customer expectations, but it's also really important in terms of preparing for the future. So this shows how SMB leaders are planning for the future and prioritizing different technologies. So email marketing is one of the top use cases, customer service software, and also things like project management. Growing SMBs are 60% more likely to be using marketing automation. So to be planning to grow their customer base for the future. And SMBs are moving fast. 1 in 5 have implemented these technologies since the pandemic began, and 1 in 5 plan to in the next 12 months. So before I finish sharing data from the report, I'd just like to call out a few of the things which are different about Canada, where you're not like the rest of the globe. So Canadian SMBs reported that their top challenge in meeting customer expectations is implementing safety and sanitization measures, which may speak to greater care for your community and a more consistent rollout of these measures compared to, say, us in the United States. You also said that recruiting and retaining talent was your number 2 challenge for current and future growth. And it's much lower globally. So this does speak to care for your employees and your future employees. And tech adoption is a bit lower in Canada, just a little bit. 53% of you reported using a CRM system as opposed to 56% globally. But I found it really interesting that the impact on customer experience was the number 1 thing that you consider when evaluating tech, as opposed to ease of use and price, which are what lead in the rest of the globe. So now I'm going to turn it over to Adam, and he's going to talk about selling in this new normal environment.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Appreciate it, and good to get a chance to spend time with you all. Love seeing the previous slide as to how we're different here in Canada. I am based locally here in Toronto, and I run the Canadian commercial and small business sales teams here for Salesforce Canada. So I was asked to come talk today a little bit about selling during the pandemic, and I think it's a really important topic as we think about ways to, and this is not really just about selling, this is about ways to engage our employees and ways to successfully run our business during the pandemic. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing to engage my sort of 60, 70 plus account executives across the country and 9-10 leaders, and really sort of keeping everybody engaged and teaching everybody on how to sell through the current crisis that we're experiencing. The first step that is super critical, and both was critical for me when the pandemic first hit, as well as our customer base, is really helping to get your employees set up working from home. And a lot of people just defer to thinking that that might mean giving somebody a laptop and they're good to go. But, first off, have we given them the right tools to work remotely? Salesforce being a cloud-based CRM and able to access any of the client data and run your business from your mobile phone is just one tool, but also video conferencing tools to engage with clients. What we did at Salesforce is we gave our staff a budget to expense home office equipment to get them comfortable in their home setup. And then we also had to factor in that we have employees of all different demographics. Some people, like Karen was mentioning, like her and myself, I have a 1-year-old at home, have to balance, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, keeping childcare and kids entertained while trying to run your business. And so being able to provide tools to your employees, we use some Salesforce technology for parents to keep kids entertained through videos, through live webinar music sessions, etc. And we also have to look at the other demographic of we have a lot of single people that are by themselves in a condo trying to get through this crisis alone. And so by providing virtual card games and collaboration groups and stuff to do outside of the work environment and really making people feel comfortable in their current home environment. Once you have your employees really set up and comfortable at home, trying to create a remote culture. This, if I can tell you, I've done a lot of virtual dinners and roundtables with clients, and the one consistent that continues to come up is how do I build a culture in this environment? Before the pandemic, I hear from clients all the time, we had an office where we'd have bring your dog to work and ping pong tables in the lunchroom. And all of a sudden, we're in this remote world. What's the difference in working at our company versus my competitor when we're on 7 to 8 hours of Zoom calls all day long? How do I actually build a culture? And a lot of that is what we do here at Salesforce is, first off, constant communication. We have daily emails that go out to the team of just engaging, talent shows, virtual workouts, executive town halls to understand what we're doing as a business. What I love is, Mark Benioff, who's our CEO, is running a business of 50,000 employees. We have weekly town halls where people can just submit Q&A about anything, about job security, product advancements. So that's really important in creating a culture, and for you to look at as your business as what does our culture look like while we're in this remote world. Once you have your employees sort of comfortable working from home, you've developed your internal culture. The third point on my list here is now we need to create both product and programs to help your customers during this time. I love what we did. I'll tell you two examples. What we did from a corporate level is Salesforce released products, and I won't get into the weed on product, but one example is a product called work.com, which is allowing people to start to reopen their offices safely. Contact tracing applications, vaccine distribution when the time comes, self-health assessments. And then at my level, what I rolled out for my teams was I got approval from the business to give out free licenses to clients for 90 days during the pandemic to help them utilize a tool like Salesforce for remote work. And obviously the goal of that is let's get people up, let's get them running successfully, let's get them using our tools, let's help our customers during the pandemic. So hopefully we'll develop that rapport that they will buy the product afterwards, right? So we've created both product and programs that will help our customers during this time, because we don't want to be calling with our typical sales approach during a crisis that people are trying to navigate their way out of. So how do we create programs to really help clients? And what that does is that also allows your employees to feel a lot more comfortable in calling into their customers and selling with an empathetic approach. So you'll see my last point on the far right of the screen there that says, now that we've created these product and programs which will help customers, let's enable our staff on how to take that to the field. And what we noticed there is our call volume and our activity and our client engagement spiked because our internal employees felt a lot more comfortable calling customers with ways that they can help during the pandemic versus trying to call with our typical sales approaches if nothing's going on in the world and nothing's changed. So when you factor in those 4 steps, that has really, really moved the needle for me and my team during the course of the pandemic in really helping to sell during this time. So just to review, how are you helping your employees get set up working remotely? What are you doing to help them be comfortable in their home space? What are you doing to create a culture now in this remote environment? What types of products and programs have you created as a business to help your customers? And then how have you trained your people to take that out to the field? If you can kind of figure out those 4 things, I think it's a really good way to frame what it will look like to successfully sell during the pandemic. Happy to take questions after, but Laura, at this point, I'll pass things back over to you.
Thanks, Adam. So in conclusion, we just wanted to talk about steps that you can take to drive success for your business going forward. Prioritizing customer relationships, that's important even when there's not a pandemic going on. Customer relationships should always be number one. Adopting the right technology now is an excellent way to navigate these challenging times, but also to prepare yourself for the future. And scenario planning for the future. We really don't know what's happening next and exactly where we're going to be a few months, even a few weeks from now. So putting in place the technology and the plans that will help you navigate an uncertain future are really important to driving success for your business. So I think we're going to open up to questions now.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was some really great insights there. We do have a few questions already in the Slido app. And then just a reminder to you all that if you do have questions, please do submit them through there. But the first question that we have here is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to SMEs that are a bit concerned about this new normal and the challenges that it will bring?
Adam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, what I love is kind of the message that our CEO delivers is sort of get out of paralysis, right? If we, as I mentioned, we have to adapt as a business. We have to make changes. We have to look at a lot of the things that Laura was pointing out in this presentation around digital transformation. So many companies were so antiquated in their working environments that all of a sudden the pandemic hit, they didn't know how to set up remote work. And they had all these antiquated systems that they were forcing employees back to the office sooner than people felt comfortable with, because they didn't have the tools to allow their employees to work in a remote environment. And B, they didn't have the tools to allow their employees to return to the workplace in a safe fashion. So, the one advice I would give SMEs is get out of paralysis, if I'm echoing our CEO, really look at your business, and the businesses that are pivoting, making changes and adapting are the businesses that are succeeding and really thriving in terms of their growth during the current situation. Businesses that have the mindset of, yeah, this is kind of a short-term thing and let's just operate the way we're operating and not make any changes and this thing will pass over, are the ones that are shrinking by the month here. So that would be the one piece of advice that I would really give is really get out of paralysis and look at your business and understand the areas that you are able to pivot in this new world.
Perfect.
So I'm just going to add.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, I just wanted to add to that. Something that Adam said earlier was talking about empathy. And so we've talked a lot about digitization, but the end goal of this is providing a way to make more personal connections with your customers and bringing empathy to the table with them. And that's ultimately the most important thing to focus on, I believe.
For sure. And I think what both of you have said stems really well into our next question, because obviously many brands have had to alter how they communicate with their customers during the pandemic. And I think the empathy piece really plays into that. The next question is what is your advice for businesses when it comes to the timing and the tone of their marketing or sales outreach?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. Well, I think, there's nothing wrong with the timing and the sales outreach, as long as, my biggest advice to my staff are both, I give them the same advice, mind you, about their internal careers, as well as our marketing pitches, be relevant, right? If you're going to be pushing out marketing, by the same token, is the marketing and the sales messaging that you're pushing out, why is it relevant now? How are you helping customers with what they're going through in their business now? I wouldn't be pushing out the same marketing content, as I mentioned, that I was doing pre-COVID, as if nothing in the world is going on, but you really need to remain relevant. I love this story about this just the way businesses are pivoting. We have a customer in the tent business, and this company was doing tents for concerts, fairs, venues, like the really high-end tents to kind of set up at flea markets and you name it. All of a sudden the pandemic hit and their business pretty much shut down overnight. Now, they can't keep pushing out marketing content around setting up tents for live concert venues and fairs and exhibitions, and start marketing that out because it's not relevant, it's not happening, and clients would almost be saying, hey, what are you sending me? This company pivoted almost overnight, and they started working with hospitals, governments, to stand up tents for COVID testing centers. And so a lot of these drive-through tents or these COVID testing centers, they started to utilize their tents for that manner, and then kind of started pushing out marketing content around other testing centers that were opening up and working with the government on where you can get tested locally to you, and that their tents were there for people that were worried if it was too hot. These are air-conditioned tents or whatever the case is. So, pretty niche example, but the content that you're pushing out, if you make sure that it's relevant to the current time, then there's no issue with what you're sending and what timing is, because people want advice and they want to be helped. Companies want services that are going to help them grow their business during this time. I don't know, Laura, if there's anything else you wanted to add on top of that.
Well, there was a quick evolution, I think, from our perspective after COVID started, and I'm sure it happened to everyone here on the phone that they received some sort of email or communication that was completely tone deaf early on. I know I was getting ads for clothing that were talking about kind of what you need for the night out, and I'm thinking, wait, I'm locked down with my children. I don't need to dress up right now. But from our perspective, we very quickly had to pivot our communications because we wanted to make sure, like Adam said, that we were relevant, and that we weren't showing photos of people out having a good time when no one was having a good time, or people gathered in crowds when the advice was not to be gathered in crowds. So we wanted to acknowledge the crisis and what people were going through. At the same time, I think a month or two in, I think we all got a little exhausted by the constant acknowledgement of the crisis, these uncertain times, in every email and every ad. So I think where we landed was being relevant to people's needs, having a positive tone and a positive outlook, but not continually reminding people about the crisis that they were experiencing, because it's here. We all know it's here. We can't get away from it. We just want to know how businesses can help us.
Yeah, man, let's remember, like Laura said before we move to the next, when we talk about being relevant, it's not just in reference to COVID, right? We're in the middle of an economic crisis, a public health crisis, a social justice crisis. And so there are many ways that we can be relevant in the current time, if not COVID specific. And I know we've been focusing a lot on that today, but really when we talk about being relevant, there are multiple crises going on across the globe right now that we could be relevant for.
Yes, definitely.
Perfect. And the next question we have is, what actions would you tell small businesses to take now to be more nimble and respond to changes in the market? And how can we get our teams to embrace those goals?
I can start with one. I think the main difference that we're seeing back in March, April, when the COVID crisis first hit us, a lot of people were in stabilization mode. They were trying to figure out their personal lives, what's happening with kids going to school, what's my living situation, what is work going to be like, do we have job security? And companies were in stabilization mode of as I said, how are we getting our employees to work remotely? We're closing our offices. Business really took a big hit across the board. And we're months removed from that. We're now in a sort of rebound time where everybody, obviously we're kind of experiencing different things across the globe in different stages of COVID and what the situation with schools and whatnot are. But as a general statement, people are stabilized in their current sort of mode of work and life, and are really looking at, okay, this is kind of where we are, and are really looking to grow their businesses now. So we're having less and less sort of really timid conversations and just checking in on folks, and really everybody's now sort of stabilized and looking to grow their business. So I really think that hiring the right talent, training people on what is our sort of pivot as a company, what are we taking to the field, everybody's back to business, if you want to look at it in that way. And they might not be back to the office in a lot of cases, but everybody is back to doing business, growing their business, engaging with people. And so you really shouldn't feel timid to reach out to clients at this point and really engage in your day-to-day. But just as a business, really figure out where that pivot is for you as a business and what programs you're going to take to the field, because we are in sort of a recovery rebound mode now, and everybody is, I'm finding, looking to engage if we're able to help. But it's not, hey, why are you reaching out to me? Don't you know what's going on in the world anymore? It's, yes, we're back to business. Let's chat, and I'd love to understand, how you can work with us.
And I'll just draw attention back to the research, which showed that the number 2 challenge that SMBs are experiencing is meeting customer expectations. So just continuing to focus on responding to customers in innovative and compelling ways, utilizing your people and your technology to continue to innovate and drive better customer experiences. So focusing on customers is always a good strategy, whether there's a pandemic or other crisis or not. Just continue to put them first and find out what they want. If you don't know what they want, reach out, call them, have everyone in your everyone in your company having conversations with customers, making sure you know how they're doing and what they want from you.
Perfect. Well, those are the questions that we've received through the Slido app so far. Is there anything else, Adam and Laura, that you wanted to say maybe before I close things out?
I'll add in one point that came to mind as I've been thinking through things here and what we're doing, just in terms of selling through the pandemic. You have targets per se, or goals, or whatever your KPIs are, that you've given not only your sales teams, but all the roles in your business sort of pre-COVID. And now we're in this remote environment, and it's important to also sort of reimagine how you want to measure your folks. And I'll give you an example. We released these work.com products that I was talking about around, really getting back to the office safely, contact tracing and health assessment. And we knew when the pandemic hit, I couldn't hold my sales team to the same targets in March, April, May, when the pandemic first hit, that they had 4 months earlier. But I also need to make sure that my staff is really helping us get the word out, and not just kind of going out golfing every day or lying in bed in their pajamas every day and not actually doing anything. So, there's a fine balance there. What we figured out is you're not in that time, you're not going to be responsible for the same sales target, but we need you to present this new solution that we came out with to 50 customers a week or a month or whatever the case is. That's what we labeled, that is you participating to the business and getting the word out onto the street. Here's a presentation. I want you to take this to your clients and present it 50 times. And even though you might not be hitting the same sales figures, this is how we're going to measure. We're going to give you a break on that for now, but this is how we're going to measure that you're actually contributing and participating. versus kind of lying around and doing nothing. So, you know, it's also good to reimagine what participation, quote unquote, looks like in every role in your business during the current situation, and how you're going to measure each role, whether it's sales or service or marketing, and really make sure that all of your employees are participating to the company, given the current scenario. So that's one thing that's helped me navigate the current crisis. Laura?
So it's uncomfortable not knowing what the future holds. It's uncomfortable for all of us, both personally and professionally. And we've certainly been tested in ways that we've never been tested before. So continuing to focus on making sure that our employees and our customers are safe is important. And then taking a pause and just thinking about what are the features, what are the infrastructure that we haven't invested in previously that we can work on now to set ourselves up for success in the future. So taking everything that we've learned, and boy, we have learned a lot over the past 6 months, and using it to be better stewards of our companies, of our employees, and our communities. Like I said early on, SMBs are such a resilient and innovative bunch, and we have been so impressed and learned so much from so many of the companies that we work with. So doubling down on customer experiences, adapting your business, you can do it. Do it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for those really great insights today, and to you both for your time, and again to Salesforce for your ongoing support of the Canadian Business Resiliency Network. And on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has joined us today. You can learn more about the Chamber's efforts and access additional resources on our website at chamber.ca.